Have you ever wondered what secrets ancient objects still hold? Secrets of kings, gods, and lost civilizations. Welcome to Unearthed Secrets, where we explore history's most mysterious relics. If you enjoy uncovering hidden stories, please subscribe, like, and tell us where you're watching from and the time it is there. Let's begin. The staff that drew circles in air. In the jungles of Guatemala, where the air hangs heavy with warmth and the cries of unseen birds echo through the canopy, there once rose cities of stone unlike any the world had ever seen. Their plazas opened beneath the sun, their pyramids pointed toward the heavens, and their stairways seemed to lift mortal feet into the realm of gods. Beneath those towering steps and within shadowed chambers, rulers held objects that were not merely ornaments or tools but instruments of power, symbols so charged with meaning that to hold them was to command both earth and sky. Among those symbols was one most curious of all, the Scepter of K'awiil, the staff said to draw circles in air, connecting rulers to the divine forces that governed rain, lightning, fertility, and kingship itself. The Maya, whose civilization spanned centuries before the Spanish ever set foot on their lands, believed that every ruler was not merely a political figure but a sacred intermediary. Kings and queens did not simply wear crowns or sit on thrones. They embodied the gods in ritual performance. To see a ruler hold the Scepter of K'awiil was to see the line between human and divine blur. The staff itself, usually carved from jade or obsidian and shaped with serpentine forms, bore the likeness of the god K'awiil, whose head often sprouted a serpent and whose forehead sometimes carried a smoking torch. To lift it, to hold it before the gathered masses, was to declare that the gods spoke through you, that the rains would come because your hand had signaled the heavens, that maize would grow because your lineage was chosen. The scepter was more than wood or stone, it was an axis, a pivot point. When the ruler raised it, drawing slow arcs before the crowd, those watching did not merely see a gesture, they saw the world itself being aligned. The circle traced in air was a mirror of the circle of the calendar, the endless turning of days, the cycle of planting and harvest, of birth and death. It was not random motion, it was a reminder that the king's hand could keep time moving forward. Without him, the circle might break. In murals uncovered at sites like Bonampak and Yaxlan, kings and queens hold the staff of K'awiil in elaborate ceremonies. The plazas filled with incense smoke, rising like pale clouds above carved stelae, and the people below, pressed close to watch their ruler embody the god. The scepter shone, polished to catch the sun, its serpent eyes glimmered, as if alive, and the figure of K'awiil carved into its head seemed to shift in the smoke, a being halfway between lightning strike and divine messenger. Every movement was deliberate. The ruler's hand lifted, traced an arc, then lowered. In that circle drawn through air, time itself was renewed. The Maya conception of time was unlike ours. They did not see it as a straight line, but as an endless weaving of cycles. The calendar turned with sacred precision, with days tied to deities, numbers bound to omens, and years repeating like the maize harvest. The staff, in this sense, was a living calendar pointer. Each circle in the air echoed the round calendar stone, the turning of the 260-day sacred count, and the long cycle of creation. To hold it was to hold the map of eternity. Imagine a king of Tikal, his body painted with cinnabar red, his headdress rising in feathers of Quetzal green, stepping before his people at the turn of a baktoon. One of the vast calendar cycles. The crowd gathers in silence, broken only by the beating of turtle-shell drums. He lifts the Scepter of K'awiil. The staff is heavy, carved of dense stone, cool against his skin, but it vibrates faintly, as though alive. With deliberate motion, he raises it high, lets the sunlight catch upon its jade, and then traces a circle. The circle widens, arcs, closes. At that moment, the air itself seems to shift, as if recognizing the sign. To the people below, it is not a gesture, it is the renewal of the sun's journey, a reminder that the seasons will continue, that the gods still favor their ruler. But the staff was not only about power over time, it was also about the storm. K'awiil was the god of lightning, of sudden fire from the sky. His serpents flashed like bolts, his forehead torch smoked like thunderclouds. When the scepter was lifted, it was not only circles of calm eternity, but jagged flashes of divine energy that people imagined. The king holding the staff could command rain when crops thirsted, could call lightning to punish enemies, could summon fertility to renew the earth. Farmers who bent over their maize fields believed their king held the connection between their labor and the god's generosity. If the king failed to wield the scepter, if the circle was broken, famine might follow. Archaeologists uncover fragments of such scepters in tombs of Maya rulers. In Copan, in Palenque, in the rich burial chambers lined with jade, they find carvings of K'awiil's serpent head, the unmistakable smoking torch forehead, the curling snout. Each fragment speaks of ritual nights where incense burned, conch shell trumpets roared, and rulers held aloft their scepters, tracing arcs by firelight. The staff itself became part of the king's body, an extension of his voice. To see it was to hear the gods speak, even if no words passed his lips. The idea of drawing circles in air has its deeper resonance too. In Maya cosmology, the universe was itself a great circle. The four corners of the earth stretched out from a central axis, the ceiba tree that joined underworld, earth and sky. To move in circles was to echo that cosmic design. The staff then was a miniature ceiba, a portable axis mundi. Each gesture was a reenactment of creation. When the king traced the circle, he was not only renewing time, he was stabilizing the very structure of the cosmos. Imagine now a night ceremony. Torches flicker against temple steps, the stars wheel slowly overhead, brilliant in the tropical sky. Drums echo like heartbeats. The king appears, barefoot upon the stone, his face painted with black lines, his headdress swaying with feathers. He holds the staff of K'awiil in both hands. Around him nobles chant, scribes record, and the common people watch in silence. He lifts the staff, its serpent head glinting, and begins to move it slowly through the night air. A circle takes form, illuminated not by chalk or ink but by firelight and belief. When the circle closes, the people exhale as one. They know the sun will rise again, that rains will come, that maize will grow. For them the circle is not symbolic, it is real. The staff carried another meaning, lineage. To hold it was to show not only divine favor, but the bloodline of rulers stretching back through centuries. Kings often traced their ancestry to gods themselves, to the hero twins of the Popol Vuh, to the great lords of the underworld, to sun and moon. When a ruler held the staff, he reminded his people that he was not merely himself, but the embodiment of all who came before. The circle he traced was also the circle of lineage, unbroken, eternal. Even queens, in some Maya cities, wielded the scepter. At Yaxchilan, Lady Kabal Shuk holds a vision serpent in stone carvings, and though her scepter is different, the symbolism is the same, circles drawn between this world and the next, the human and the divine. The act of tracing in air was never casual, it was always performance, always sacred. Over time, as the classic Maya cities fell into decline, as drought struck and wars shattered alliances, the staff of K'awiil may have been lifted in desperation. Perhaps rulers stood before dwindling crowds, circling the air with a gesture that no longer convinced. Perhaps farmers, weary of famine, began to wonder if the circle was broken after all. The staff remained, the symbols carved, but the belief began to fray. Yet still, in tombs and in stone, the staff endures, reminding us of the world once imagined where power was movement, where the divine could be summoned with a gesture. Even today, when archaeologists study these carvings, they notice the repeated gesture, the scepter always lifted, the arm always curved. It is as if the very art insists that rulers never cease their circles. The staff of K'awiil was not a relic left behind, it was a living memory carved into the stone of temples, preserved in glyphs, whispering across centuries. And so we imagine again the jungle plaza. The drums beat low, the torches flare, the incense rises in pale threads. A ruler, painted and crowned, steps forward. In his hand gleams the staff, the god of lightning and lineage, of time and eternity. Slowly, deliberately, he lifts it. The crowd stills. The arc begins. A circle is drawn in air, and in that circle, the world continues. The scroll that hid its words. In the vastness of the Gobi Desert, where the wind sweeps across dunes that appear endless and the stars gleam in crystalline clarity above, there lies a place whose silence once guarded secrets for 1,000 years. The Mogao Caves, carved into cliffs near the town of Dunhuang, stand as both sanctuary and enigma. Once, they were filled with the footsteps of monks, the murmured cadence of prayers, and the careful brushstrokes of scribes bent over parchment and silk. But within those caves, hidden away behind a sealed wall, there rested something more, a library of scrolls, folded, stacked, and forgotten, as if the words themselves had conspired to vanish. These are the Dunhuang manuscripts, sometimes called the world's oldest time capsule of written thought, and for centuries, they remained the scrolls that hid their words. Imagine the desert centuries ago, around the time when Dunhuang was a crossroads of the Silk Road. Caravans came from the east, bearing silk, lacquerware, and porcelain. Others arrived from the west, bringing spices, gemstones, and strange philosophies. Camels groaned under their loads, bells tinkling as their hooves pressed into the dust. Merchants bartered in languages that blended and tangled together: Chinese, Sanskrit, Sogdian, Tibetan, Arabic, and more. Dunhuang was not merely a place on a map, it was a hinge of civilizations where ideas could be traded like coins. And in such a place, words held power. Words could shape faith, direct kings, or console the weary. So it was that scrolls came to Dunhuang, scrolls filled with sutras, with accounts, with contracts, with songs. Within the caves, monks painted vast murals on the walls, depicting heavenly realms, radiant Buddhas, and journeys through afterlives. Pilgrims came to gaze upon them, leaving offerings or prayers. The air would have been thick with the faint burn of oil lamps, with incense smoke curling into the carved ceilings, with the hushed reverence of devotion. And somewhere, in a small chamber among these caves, scrolls began to accumulate. Some were copied in elegant calligraphy, onto silk or paper. Others were humble, scrawled on scraps of hemp, or written in everyday hand. Over centuries, this room became full, its shelves and baskets crowded with the weight of memory. But then, one day, it was sealed. No one knows precisely why. Perhaps a monk decided that the scrolls were too sacred to discard, yet too old to remain in use. Perhaps there was fear of invasion, or of fire, or of some greater peril. Whatever the reason, a wall of bricks closed off the room. Time moved on, dynasties rose and fell, empires clashed and faded, and in the silence of the Mogao caves, the words within those scrolls slept, waiting for the world to stumble upon them again. It would take nearly 1,000 years before their silence was disturbed. In 1900, a Taoist monk named Wang Yuanlu, who had devoted himself to repairing and watching over the caves, stumbled upon what seemed like an ordinary sealed doorway. Clearing rubble and dust, he opened it, and behind lay the secret chamber filled floor to ceiling with manuscripts. Tens of thousands of scrolls, layered and stacked, many wrapped, some crumbling, yet all surviving in the desert's dry air. Imagine his lantern casting flickering light across the scrolls, the faded inks glinting faintly. It must have felt as though the cave itself had opened its memory. News of the discovery spread, and soon foreign explorers made their way to Dunhuang. Men such as Aurel Stein, Paul Pelliot, and others negotiated with Wang, acquiring scrolls and sending them across the world to London, Paris, St. Petersburg, Tokyo, and beyond. And so the hidden library was no longer hidden, its words scattered like seeds carried on the wind, but its mystery only deepened. What do these manuscripts contain? To wander among their pages is to journey through 1,000 forgotten lives. There are Buddhist sutras in Chinese, copied with patient brushstrokes, their characters sometimes neat, sometimes hurried. There are texts in Tibetan, in Sanskrit, in Old Uyghur, even in Hebrew and Syriac. There are apocryphal stories, tales of kings and miracles, fragments of calendars, manuals for divination, records of loans and contracts. There are letters, some almost painfully ordinary, complaints about unpaid debts, pleas for assistance, reports of disputes. There are songs, some written with notations of ancient music. Together, the manuscripts form a portrait not of one civilization, but of many, converging at a desert crossroads. The sheer variety is staggering. One scroll might contain a Buddhist sermon on compassion, another, a Taoist hymn, another, a Christian text from the Nestorian church that had spread east along the Silk Road. Imagine the scribe who copied them, dipping brush into ink, aware that his words might echo across borders. Imagine the pilgrims who listened to these words read aloud, perhaps understanding some, perhaps only feeling their resonance. And then imagine that all of it was sealed away, as though hidden for a future age when humanity might again need them. What is most curious is how the scrolls blur the line between sacred and mundane. We might expect a cave library to contain only lofty texts, holy scriptures, and philosophical treatises. Yet among the sutras are humble contracts, a record of grain owed, a loan taken, a list of household goods. The everyday survives alongside the eternal. In this, the manuscripts remind us that human life is never only about the divine or the mundane, it is always both, interwoven. A temple might ring with chants of eternity, but outside, debts still must be paid. In Dunhuang, both were written down and stored, side by side. The physical beauty of the scrolls also enchants. Some are written on silk, their sheen preserved through the centuries, the calligraphy flowing like water. Others are coarse, brown paper, brittle with age. Some scrolls unfurl to astonishing lengths, many meters long, carrying uninterrupted streams of characters. Others are small slips, folded into compact forms. The very act of touching such a scroll today is to touch 1,000 years, to feel fibers once pressed by the hand of an ancient scribe. Yet not all of their words are easy to read. Time has worn away ink, rodents have gnawed edges, water stains blur lines. Some scrolls seem deliberately erased, overwritten, or redacted. Scholars puzzle over these gaps, asking, what was meant to be hidden? Were dangerous ideas suppressed, or were these merely accidents of preservation? In this way, the Dunhuang manuscripts remain true to their name, the scrolls that hide their words. Even revealed, they are not fully revealed. For historians, the manuscripts are like a window into the Silk Road's soul. They reveal how cultures blended, how Buddhism in China absorbed influences from India, how local folktales mingled with grand cosmologies. They show travelers riding home, merchants counting coins, kings commanding loyalty, monks preaching patience. They reveal lives otherwise forgotten, captured not in monuments or legends, but in ink and fiber. To study them is to walk through a ghostly marketplace of voices, some loud, some faint, all layered upon one another. And still, questions linger. Why was the chamber sealed so carefully? Was it truly just storage? Was it protection? Was there a ritual in hiding the words? Some suggest that the scrolls were placed there as a symbolic offering, a library turned into a tomb of texts, preserved not for use but for eternity. Others believe it was simply practical, that the manuscripts were old and fragile, and monks reluctant to destroy sacred writings stored them in reverence. The truth may never be known. The silence of the wall that hid them is as eloquent as the words they contained. Today, the manuscripts are scattered in museums and libraries around the globe. Scholars painstakingly piece them together like fragments of a shattered mirror. Digital archives now attempt to reunite them virtually, allowing us to glimpse once more the fullness of the hidden library. Yet the act of piecing them together is itself like deciphering time, a slow, careful process, where every character recovered is a voice returned. The desert still holds its silence. The Mogao caves, with their painted Buddhas and their darkened chambers, continue to stand watch over the land. Tourists visit, scholars study, but the weight of centuries remains. Somewhere in that silence, one can almost hear the whisper of scrolls unfolding, the rustle of silk against stone, the murmur of words that hid themselves for 1,000 years before being found. And so the story of the Dunhuang manuscripts is not just about paper or ink. It is about memory, about forgetting, and about rediscovery. It is about the strange fate of words that they can outlast empires, slumber in silence, and then rise again, speaking across centuries. To hold one of those scrolls, to read its faded lines, is to touch the lives of those who once stood at the desert's edge, who traded and prayed and sang, who lived and who vanished, leaving only their words to remain. The scrolls hid their words, but in hiding, they preserved them, and in their preservation, they continue to whisper to us, urging us to listen, to the kings and the monks, the merchants and the wanderers, the forgotten and the remembered, all gathered, still, in the silence of a cave by the desert's endless horizon. The crown that glowed like grass. Beneath the pale sun of the Peloponnesian hills, where stone ridges lift against the sky and cicadas hum endlessly in summer heat, there once thrived a kingdom remembered in both song and silence. Mycenae, fortified with massive walls, home to kings who became legends, and buried beneath its soil treasures that gleam with an otherworldly glow. Among those treasures lies a crown, though it is unlike the jeweled circlets of later monarchs. It is thin, hammered from sheets of gold, delicate yet enduring. It is called a diadem, though in the eyes of those who uncovered it, it seemed more like a miracle, the crown that glowed like grass. To speak of it, one must first imagine the land of Mycenae as it was more than 3,000 years ago. The hills were dry, dotted with olive groves and vineyards, their slopes carved into terraces where grain bent in the wind. From the citadel's height, the sea shimmered in the distance, carrying ships toward distant islands. The great lion gate stood watch, its carved guardians towering over all who entered. Within those walls, palaces rose, their walls painted with vivid frescoes, warriors in chariots, hunting scenes, and rituals of gods both feared and adored. In such a place, gold was more than wealth. It was the very skin of divinity, a metal that did not tarnish, that gleamed like eternal sunlight. The diadem itself was discovered centuries later, in the 19th century, when Heinrich Schliemann, an excavator with both vision and controversy clinging to his name, arrived at Mycenae with a dream of proving the stories of Homer true. He dug into the shaft graves near the citadel, uncovering objects so resplendent they seemed torn from myth. Masks of beaten gold, cups, weapons, ornaments, and among them a band of gold so fine it seemed woven from light. To Schliemann, it was proof that the kings of Mycenae had been as magnificent as any sung by bards. To later scholars, it was an artifact more complex, both fragile and powerful, a crown not for battle, but for burial, an adornment placed upon the brow of the dead to carry them into eternity. Why, though, did it glow like grass? Not in color, for gold does not share the green of leaves, but in texture, in shimmer. The diadem was hammered thin, its surface etched with delicate patterns that caught the light in ways reminiscent of fields swaying in sunlight. Perhaps the craftsman intended to mimic nature, to turn the richness of the earth into an eternal springtime crown. Or perhaps it was coincidence that the lines of chasing and repoussé simply happened to ripple like grass in the wind. Yet when it was found, lying amidst the bones of a long-forgotten ruler, the impression was unmistakable. It seemed alive, glowing softly, as though even after millennia underground, it still carried the breath of fields. Let us imagine its first wearer, a king. Perhaps, though the word may not fit precisely. The Mycenaean world was a tapestry of rulers, chiefs, and lords, each presiding over fortified strongholds, their power drawn from war, trade, and alliance. Whoever wore this diadem was a figure of immense importance. Picture the crown being placed upon his head during a ceremony, the flicker of torches reflecting upon it, priests murmuring prayers, offerings of wine poured upon the ground. The diadem would not have been worn in daily life, for it was too fragile. Rather, it was a symbol, a luminous band reserved for moments when human life touched the divine. And finally, at the end, it was laid upon him in death, to shine within the tomb as though the earth itself acknowledged his passage. The craftsmanship tells its own story. Unlike later crowns heavy with jewels, this Mycenaean diadem relies on simplicity. Thin sheets of gold were hammered until they were nearly weightless, then cut and shaped into bands that could encircle the brow. Some were adorned with rosettes, spirals, or repeating motifs, designs echoing the natural world, as though order and beauty were intertwined. The Mycenaean artisans were masters not only of strength, able to forge swords and armor, but also of delicacy. In their hands, gold became something like fabric, pliable, flowing. To wear such a diadem was to wear the sun itself. When Schliemann unearthed it, he saw in it the echo of Agamemnon, the king who, in Homer's epic, led the Greeks to war against Troy. He believed, or wished to believe, that the mask, the diadem, the treasures he found were directly linked to that saga. "I have gazed upon the face of Agamemnon," he declared. Though modern scholars doubt the connection. Yet whether or not the diadem adorned Agamemnon, it belongs to that same world, the age of heroes, where myth and memory blur. In that sense, its glow is not only physical but symbolic, a light cast across centuries of storytelling. But the diadem holds other mysteries as well. Why so many diadems in Mycenaean graves? Were they only for kings or for queens as well? Some suggest that women too wore them, symbols of status and sanctity. The graves yield both male and female skeletons adorned with such crowns, and in their thinness one feels a tenderness, as though the living wished not to burden the dead with heavy gold, but to grant them a crown that was more dream than substance, a crown that shimmered like life itself, fragile yet eternal. Imagine, too, the moment it was placed in the tomb, the mourners gathered, the body prepared, offerings arranged, weapons, cups, jewelry, food, perhaps even sacrifices. The diadem rested last, laid across the brow or around the head, completing the image of a ruler transfigured into ancestor. The chamber was then sealed, its stones fitted tightly, the earth pressed above. Darkness closed in, yet within that darkness the gold still shone. Gold does not rust, does not fade. It lay waiting, century upon century, as kingdoms rose and fell, as languages changed, as the very names of those buried there dissolved into silence. Yet the diadem endured, glowing like grass in a field no wind touched. When it emerged again into daylight, the world had changed beyond measure. No longer did kings rule from Mycenae's walls. The citadel itself had long fallen into ruin, its stones overgrown with lichen, but the diadem spoke across that gulf, reminding all who saw it that once, here, in this land, there were rulers whose power was not only military but ceremonial, who believed in the necessity of beauty even in death. For what else is a crown, if not a promise that the one who wears it stands apart, touched by something greater? The diadem also connects Mycenae to a broader tapestry of ancient Mediterranean cultures. Gold diadems appear in Crete, in Cyprus, in Anatolia. Each carries echoes of similar forms. Delicate bands that shimmer in firelight. Perhaps they were inspired by one another, carried along trade routes, exchanged as gifts. Or perhaps they arose independently, born from the universal human desire to shape gold into symbols of eternity. What binds them is the sense that gold, unlike any other metal, does not belong fully to this world. Its glow is unnatural, untarnished, like sunlight trapped in earth. To wear it is to claim a connection to the immortal. And yet, even as we marvel at the diadem, we must also recognize its fragility. Hold it in the hand, and one realizes how easily it could be bent, how soft the gold is. This was not a crown for war. It was not meant to withstand the weight of action or the blows of battle. It was for ceremony, for ritual, for the threshold between life and death. It reminds us that even in a culture famed for its warriors and fortresses, there was reverence for delicacy, for quiet beauty, for the shimmer of grass in a field at sunset. The crown that glowed like grass thus tells two stories. One is of power, a ruler crowned, honored, remembered. The other is of transience, a fragile band, thin as a leaf, surviving only by chance, buried and forgotten until unearthed. In this way it mirrors life itself, bright, fleeting, yet enduring in memory. The Mycenaean who once wore it is long gone, his name unknown, his deeds forgotten, But the diadem he left behind still gleams, whispering across time, its glow undimmed, and perhaps if one looks closely, it still seems to move, its chaste lines rippling like grass, stirred by a phantom breeze. A reminder that in gold, in memory, in story, the past is never fully still. The mask that carried a smile. In the red earth of central Nigeria, where grasslands rise and fall in long undulating plains, and where the rains bring sudden floods of green across the savanna, something extraordinary once took shape beneath human hands. Long before the age of empires, before the rise of kingdoms that history now names, Yoruba, Benin, Mali, there was a culture whose voice has been almost entirely lost. What remains are fragments, shards of clay, the ruins of furnaces, the whisper of iron beaten into shape, and faces sculpted in terracotta, left to sleep beneath the soil. Among those faces, one stands out, a head that carries the faintest curve of a smile. The Nok terracotta, a mask that seems at once human and otherworldly, fragile and eternal, gazing across thousands of years with lips that seem on the edge of laughter. The Nok culture, named after the village where the first pieces were unearthed, flourished more than 2,000 years ago, perhaps as early as 1000 BCE. It stretched across the Jos Plateau and beyond, a network of communities living by farming, hunting, and the new and transformative art of iron smelting. They were among the first in sub-Saharan Africa to master iron, shaping tools that cut through soil, weapons that shifted the balance of survival. Yet if iron was their strength, clay was their memory. For in terracotta, they left behind not only figures of humans and animals, but expressions so vivid that, even eroded, they still seem alive. The head with the smile is small compared to a living person, though crafted with care. The clay was shaped, fired, hardened, then left to endure centuries of burial. Its surface bears the marks of erosion, yet the features remain: almond-shaped eyes, a slender nose, and lips gently upturned, as though amused by a private thought. Unlike some knockheads which carry solemn, distant expressions, this one seems warm, intimate. It is the smile that draws the eye. Not broad, not exaggerated, but subtle, the kind of smile one gives in a moment of quiet recognition, when words are unnecessary. What did it mean, this smile in clay? Was it meant to depict a real person, a chief, a priest, a revered ancestor, or was it the face of an ideal, a spirit, an image for ritual use? No one can say for certain. The Nok left no writing, no chronicles. Their story is told only through the earth itself, through the artifacts unearthed by accident in tin mines, through fragments scattered and sold, through the patient work of archaeologists piecing together a culture that once flourished and vanished. Yet the smile speaks across silence, more eloquent than any inscription. It is the trace of humanity, of joy, of identity. To understand the Nok terracotta, one must imagine the world in which it was made. The plateau region was fertile, dotted with rivers and streams. Crops of millet and sorghum rose in fields, while cattle grazed. Villages clustered together, huts built of clay and thatch, smoke curling from hearths. The people worked iron furnaces, the glow of fire lighting their nights, hammering out tools that would transform their lives. And in their quiet hours, they shaped clay into forms, sometimes animals, sometimes abstract, sometimes faces like this one. Each figure was more than art. They were objects of meaning, tied to ritual, to belief, to memory. They may have stood in shrines, or been buried with the dead, or used in ceremonies long forgotten. The smile suggests something beyond solemn ritual, though. It suggests personality, presence, perhaps even playfulness. Could it be that the Nok, in shaping their figures, were not only serving the gods but also celebrating humanity itself? That they found joy in depicting the curve of lips, the lift of an eyebrow, the spark of expression? It is one of the mysteries of their art. Though we know so little of their language, their myths, their rituals, the terracotta figures reveal a sensitivity to life that speaks across millennia. They remind us that people long ago laughed, loved, and grieved, just as we do now. Terracotta itself is fragile, and yet, paradoxically, enduring. Clay cracks easily, but once fired, it can last for thousands of years if the earth cradles it gently. That is what happened with the Nok heads. They were buried, forgotten, then rediscovered. Some were unearthed whole, many more in pieces. Some were taken far from Nigeria, sold into collections abroad, their origins blurred, and yet, whether in museums or still beneath the soil, they retain their power. To look upon them is to meet eyes shaped 2,000 years ago, to glimpse a smile that has not faded. The Nok smile raises questions of meaning. Perhaps it was symbolic, meant to ward off evil, to embody serenity, to reassure the living of the benevolence of the spirits. Perhaps it was a portrait of a loved one, a remembrance preserved in clay. Or perhaps it was part of a mask, worn in rituals, the terracotta shaping the identity of a performer as they danced or chanted. If so, the smile may not have belonged to a person at all, but to a god, a spirit, a being whose nature was joy. Without words the figure speaks, and its message is subtle but undeniable. Life has laughter in it, even in the presence of death. The Nok terracotta heads are also among the earliest known examples of large-scale figural art in Africa south of the Sahara. They precede the bronze heads of Ife and Benin by over 1,000 years. In them, we see the seeds of traditions that would later flourish. Attention to detail, mastery of form, the desire to depict humanity not only in power but in expression. The smile then is not an accident, but part of a lineage of art, a beginning that echoes into the future. Archaeologists who first encountered these terracottas were struck by their sophistication. How could a culture so early create art so refined? But this question, rooted in colonial doubt, overlooked a truth. African civilizations were ancient, complex, and creative long before outsiders recorded them. The Nok smile is proof of that. It is not an anomaly but a fragment of a vast tradition, much of which remains hidden beneath the soil. Each fragment is a reminder that history is larger than the records of empires, that beauty thrives even in silence. To sit before the Nok head, one feels both closeness and distance. Closeness because the smile is universal, immediately understood, bridging time; distance because we cannot know its full meaning, cannot hear the language it once belonged to, cannot stand in the ritual for which it was made. It is like hearing a melody without knowing the song. And yet perhaps that is enough. The smile itself is a kind of song, carried across centuries, whispering of joy, of presence, of life remembered. The red earth that covered the Nok terracotta is itself a part of the story. Clay from the same soil was shaped into the head, fired in kilns or pits, then returned to the ground. The land and the art are inseparable. When we look upon the terracotta, we are seeing earth transformed into memory, matter shaped into meaning. The smile is not only a human expression, it is the land itself, carried into form by hands long gone, preserved by the patience of the earth. And so the Nok terracotta head, the mask that carried a smile, endures as a symbol of a culture whose name we know only through chance, whose people spoke languages we cannot recover, whose lives were rich and full yet mostly silent to us. And still, through this fragment, they speak. They tell us that joy existed, that art was cherished, that humanity was honored. They tell us that even in the depths of time, someone found it worth shaping a smile into clay. Perhaps that is the most powerful thing, that the Nok smile is not loud, not overwhelming, but gentle. It is not a command, but an offering. It invites us not only to marvel, but to reflect. In its curve there is recognition, the past looking at us, the present looking back. A dialogue in silence, carried not in words but in form. In the quiet of a museum gallery, or in the imagination of one who reads about it, the Nok smile continues to live. It glows softly, like sunlight filtered through leaves, like memory itself, fragile, fleeting, yet enduring. A smile carried across centuries, reminding us that even in forgotten worlds, humanity shines. The stone that weighed nothing. High in the wind-swept plateau of western China, where the land rises into a desolate wilderness of rock and silence, there lies a mountain scarred by secrets. The locals call it Baigongshan, the White Mountain. From afar it looks ordinary enough, just another rocky slope among the arid ridges of Qinghai province. Yet if one dares to walk closer, they may notice shapes jutting from the stone, tubes, pipes, hollow and rigid, embedded deep into the mountain itself, some pointing outward into the open air, others vanishing into the earth as though swallowed by time. For centuries, shepherds and wanderers whispered about them. They said the mountain was not just a mountain. Some believed it was once a palace of the gods, others that it was the work of spirits who built with fire and smoke. In the 20th century, when explorers and scientists first investigated the place, they found something that defied explanation. The pipes were real, hundreds of them. Some as thick as a man's arm, others as thin as a finger, all forged of an unknown mixture of metal and stone. Some were broken, littering the ground like brittle bones of a long-extinct creature. Others were buried so deep they seemed inseparable from the mountain itself. And here was the greatest puzzle. Some of these pipes had been tested. Analyses revealed iron, yes, but also silica and calcium, blended in such a way that natural formation seemed unlikely. What's more, the composition bore signs of extreme heat, as though the mountain itself had once burned with a furnace hotter than any simple fire. Stranger still, some of the pipes were so lightweight compared to their apparent density that locals began to call them the stones that weighed nothing. How could such relics exist in a land where, according to history, no technology capable of making them should have existed? Imagine standing there on the barren plain, the wind tearing at your coat, staring at a pipe that juts out of the rock like a finger pointing toward nowhere. Around you silence presses down, broken only by the occasional whistle of sand grains skimming across stone. The mountain is hollow, some say, or was once. At its base lies a cave, though now collapsed, where explorers once crawled inside. Within they found pipes vanishing into the darkness, snaking into the mountain as if toward some hidden chamber. The cave's entrance today is sealed by landslides and time, but old accounts describe it as unmistakable. Inside that shadowed vault, the pipes were not just on the walls, they were the walls. The mystery begins to take shape in the mind like a riddle. Who built them, and why? Some suggest they were natural formations, strange crystallizations or fossilized roots hardened over eons. Yet these explanations falter, because the pipes are too regular, too geometric, too purposeful. A root may wander through stone, but it does not branch at perfect angles. A vein of mineral may glimmer, but it does not bore neat hollow tunnels. These things seem designed, machined even. In the 1990s, analysis revealed something stranger still, traces of organic material in the pipes. Some scientists suggested that perhaps the pipes had once carried water, and over millennia, sediment hardened into what resembled metal. But how could so many pipes be arranged so systematically, in places where no ancient civilization was known to have lived? The plateau was a wasteland. Thin air, little vegetation, freezing winters, scorching summers. Not a place for palaces, not a place for cities. Unless, of course, whoever built them was not human at all. Legends swirl around Beigong Shan, like the dust storms that scour its slopes. One tale tells of star people, who descended in chariots of flame, long before recorded history. They built their furnaces within the mountain, crafting pipes to draw water from the nearby salt lake, Tawson Lake. When their work was finished, or their mission failed, they left, abandoning their structures to erode under sun and wind. The pipes are their fingerprints, embedded in stone. Others whisper that the mountain is no relic of gods but of humans, forgotten ones. Perhaps a civilization older than China itself once thrived here, a people who knew the secrets of metallurgy and engineering long before dynasties rose along the Yellow River. Maybe these pipes were part of a temple, or a power system, or even aqueducts to bring sacred waters into hidden sanctuaries carved into the mountain's heart. Yet the tests trouble the mind, for samples of the pipes showed not only metals but portions so oxidized they could not have been forged in the last few centuries. Some estimates place their age at over 100,000 years. If true, that would mean these objects were created long before humans in the region were known to smelt iron, long before any empire, long before memory itself. Picture now the lake nearby, Tawson Lake. Its waters are bitter, filled with salt, so unfit to drink that no animal lingers there long, and yet the pipes point toward it, as though once they drew from its depths. Why? To cool some machine, to channel into rituals, or to use the salt for a purpose lost to time. No one can say. Locals sometimes avoid the mountain at night. They say strange lights flicker there, pale glows like lanterns without fire. Whether tricks of the atmosphere or something else, they lend weight to the legend that the place is still watched, still guarded. Even today, the area remains remote, difficult to reach, with little more than stone and silence to meet the traveler. If you close your eyes, you can almost imagine the builders at work, figures moving through the mountain's shadow, carving stone, setting the pipes into place. Fires blazing, metal melting, hammers ringing against the plateau's silence. Or perhaps they did not labor at all, but simply laid a device upon the ground, and the mountain reshaped itself around their will. To us, it appears as rusting, broken fragments of pipe. To them, it may have been something alive, pulsing, humming, channeling forces we can scarcely imagine. And yet, after all these centuries, the pipes remain. Fragile in some ways, many crumble to the touch, but enduring in others, still marking the mountain like veins of an ancient body. They do not answer questions, they only deepen them. The Beigong pipes are often dismissed in modern times as natural oddities, the result of mineral crystallization, iron-rich water, or fossilized roots. But even those explanations carry their own wonder. For if nature alone created them, then she built with the precision of an engineer, the vision of an architect, the patience of eternity. And if they are not natural, if hands once laid them here, then we must accept that somewhere in the forgotten past, a people with knowledge beyond their age left behind their work in a mountain few ever see. So they are called the stones that weighed nothing. Because though the pipes seem to belong to the weighty world of matter, of iron and rock, they instead seem to float, like riddles that never sink. Weigh them as much as you like. You will find their true burden is not in kilograms, but in mystery. Imagine the desert winds still moving across the plateau tonight. Imagine standing alone at Beigong Shan, the cold air biting your skin, and seeing one of those hollow tubes reaching from the rock toward the emptiness of the sky. Its mouth is silent, but in silence there is sound. If only you listen closely enough, the echo of ages, the rush of water long dried, the hum of fires long extinguished. The pipe does not tell you who built it, it does not tell you why, but it whispers that the world is older, stranger, and far less explained than we dare to believe. The stone that weighed nothing remains, half buried in the white mountain, waiting for hands that will never return, waiting for questions no one dares to finish asking. A riddle etched into the earth, where silence is louder than truth. The scroll that counted the end. In the quiet halls of a European library, where dust floats like pale mist through filtered shafts of light, there rests a book unlike any other. It is not a book of leather and bound pages, but a folded screen of bark paper, painted centuries before the first printing press would churn in the West. Its surface bears glyphs that twist and dance like living things, and images of gods who breathe smoke, bleed into bowls, and pull the sun across the sky. This is the Dresden Codex, one of the rarest and most mysterious manuscripts in the world, a Maya scroll that counts the heavens, measures the turning of the stars, and whispers of the end of time. The codex is fragile, its pages painted in black and red, with shades of ochre and faded blue. Each fold carries calendars that cycle endlessly, mapping the movements of Venus, the phases of the moon, the flooding of rivers, the rituals of bloodletting, and the demands of gods who feasted not on food, but on devotion. Its creators lived in the great cities of the Maya world, in towering temples hidden beneath jungles, in plazas alive with ceremony, in observatories where priests gazed at the sky as though it were a vast book itself. And in the Dresden Codex they recorded what they saw. Patterns so intricate that even today, mathematicians marvel at their precision. Cycles spanning centuries are drawn out with clarity, the kind of clarity that suggests not mere stargazers, but scientists cloaked in ritual, keeping track of time not in years, but in eternities. Picture the Maya scribes at work. It is night, and the jungle hums with cicadas and frogs, while torches crackle with resinous pine. A priest, his body painted in black soot, unrolls a strip of white lime-coated bark and begins to inscribe. His brush is fine, tipped with animal hair, dipped into pigments ground from minerals and plants. Around him assistants grind shells into powder, mix with honey, prepare ink. Slowly, symbols emerge, dots and bars, glyphs of serpents, gods, and celestial bodies. Each mark is not merely a word, but a spell of time, a lock in the great machinery of the universe. In this world, writing is not passive, it is active. To write the date of Venus's rising is to invoke Venus himself, the bright morning star, the warrior god whose appearance heralds war, sacrifice, and renewal. To inscribe the turning of the lunar cycle is to shape the rhythm of tides, crops, and wombs. The Dresden Codex is not just a calendar, it is a living calendar, a tool that ties the hands of humans to the gears of heaven, and within it lies something even darker: prophecy. Among its pages is the famous Venus table, a meticulous record of the planet's movements across centuries. For the Maya, Venus was not merely a star, it was an omen, a blade hanging above the world. Its risings and settings marked times of upheaval, of conquest, of blood offerings demanded to balance the heavens. Priests could open the codex and tell rulers when to go to war, when to make offerings, when to fear catastrophe. It is said entire battles were timed to Venus's gleam, as though the planet itself was commanding armies below. Further in the codex lies the flood page, an image that still chills the spine. A sky serpent pours water down upon the earth, drowning the world beneath torrents. Gods float in the flood, helpless. A goddess with twisted claws and a serpent crown overturns a jar, sending deluge upon deluge. Scholars read this as a vision of apocalypse, an ending of cycles when the balance of the world collapses. The Maya saw time not as a line, but as a circle. Every end was a beginning, every catastrophe the seed of renewal. The Dresden Codex does not give one single end of the world. Instead, it gives cycles, countless endings, countless beginnings, wheels within wheels that keep turning even as centuries pass. And yet, when its pages are read, one feels the weight of finality. The scroll counted the heavens, but it also counted endings, as though to remind us that no empire, no sun, no breath lasts forever. For hundreds of years, the codex lay hidden. When the Spanish arrived in the 16th century, they burned countless Maya books, declaring them works of demons. The great bonfires of Yucatan consumed libraries that had preserved thousands of years of astronomical data, ritual lore, histories of kings and gods. Only 4 codices survived into our time, and of them, the Dresden Codex is the most complete. How it came to rest in Europe remains uncertain, traded, stolen, or gifted. But by the 18th century, it had reached the Royal Library in Dresden, Germany, where it was eventually studied and given its name. There it endured wars and fires. During World War II, when Dresden was bombed, the codex was damaged, stained with water, its pigments blurred. Yet even then it survived. A scroll that had counted the destruction of worlds somehow lived through another. Its pages, though scarred, still speak. Let us imagine reading it, not as scholars, but as the Maya once did. The priest kneels on cool stone in a temple chamber. The codex lies open before him, a painted serpent of folded pages. He chants the glyphs aloud, his voice echoing off walls. To him this is not history but instruction: when to plant maize, when to call for rain, when to pierce his skin and offer blood to the gods. He follows the cycles of Venus, 5 sets of 584 days, together forming a pattern that resets with uncanny precision. He knows that Venus vanishes for 8 days before reappearing as morning star, and that this moment is dangerous, filled with unrest. He advises his king to wait, or to strike, depending on the alignment. When the sky serpent appears on the page, he does not see ink, he sees water falling from the heavens, floods destroying fields, famine following. He instructs the people to prepare rituals, to appease the goddess who pours destruction. The codex is not just read, it is enacted, and through these enactments, time itself continues to flow. The scroll becomes the world, the glyphs become reality. Centuries later, modern eyes look at the same images. We see stylized gods, strange numbers, and unfamiliar signs. But when translated, the mathematics stun us. The Maya calculated the solar year to within minutes of modern measurements. They charted eclipses with accuracy that rivals today's astronomical software. They recorded Venus's cycle with precision over spans of 500 years. These are not superstitions, they are science, wrapped in ritual, written in a script of gods and serpents, and yet, always there is the whisper of endings. The Dresden Codex reminds us that time devours itself. Cities once vast, like Chichen Itza, Tikal, and Palenque, are now swallowed by jungle. Kings who once read these glyphs lie in tombs beneath collapsed pyramids. The calendar wheels turned, and with them, whole worlds ended. In 2012, whispers spread around the globe. The Maya calendar predicted the end of the world. People feared catastrophe, apocalypse, the last breath of humanity. In truth, the calendar did not predict a single end. It marked the close of a great cycle, the 13th Baktun, a span of nearly 125 years. For the Maya, this was not the destruction of everything, but the renewal of a cosmic era, an ending that was also a beginning. The Dresden Codex holds no prophecy of absolute annihilation. It holds reminders that the world is always ending, always beginning. Think of the scroll itself, delicate yet enduring, made of a matte paper, the inner bark of fig trees, coated in lime plaster, folded accordion style. How improbable its survival has been, passed across oceans, carried through wars, soaked by rain, yet still intact. When you look upon it today in the library in Dresden, behind glass, you are staring at the heartbeat of a civilization. The breath of scribes long dead still lingers in each painted stroke. The scroll does not shout its secrets, it whispers them, quietly, steadily, in a rhythm like falling water, or the ticking of stars across the night sky. It is patient, for time is its subject, and time belongs to no one. Imagine now the night sky over the Maya world. The Milky Way arches overhead, a river of light. In the plazas below, torches flicker. Priests stand upon pyramid tops, watching Venus rise like a blade of white fire above the horizon. Somewhere, deep in a chamber, the Dresden Codex lies open, its pages waiting to be read. The priests knew the stars as intimately as we know our clocks, and with the scroll they measured their place within eternity. The scroll that counted the end is still with us, not because the world ended, but because it never does. It ends, and begins, and ends again, like breath, like tides, like seasons. The Codex teaches us not to fear the closing of cycles, but to recognize them as part of a greater turning. In its painted glyphs, gods rise and fall, serpents pour water, floods sweep the earth, Venus ignites war. Yet always the pages turn, and the calendar resets, and life continues. The scroll endures as the world endures, fragile, fleeting, yet eternal. So it rests now in silence, a survivor of fire and flood, conquest and war. The Dresden Codex, the scroll that counted not just the heavens, but the endings of worlds, a book that outlived its cities, its kings, its priests, a book that waits, whispering across centuries, reminding us that endings are never endings alone. They are beginnings written in the same ink, folded into the same pages, turning forever in the great cycle of time. The mirror that blinded the king. In the still air of the Valley of the Kings, silence rests heavy upon the shifting sands. The cliffs rise in muted ochre, cut by ancient hands into hollow tombs, where kings, priests, and pharaohs carried their stories into eternity. Among the treasures buried in these stone chambers, there lies an object often overlooked among the golden death masks and dazzling jewels, a mirror. Not a mirror in the way we know them today, glass backed with silver, but something far older, far stranger. This one, belonging to Tutankhamun, was made of polished metal, bronze burnished, until it captured light in an almost otherworldly way. To call it a mirror is both true and false, for it reflected, yes, but not always as you might expect. Some say it was crafted not only to catch the king's face, but also to trap the sun itself, bending the very rays of Ra into a weapon, a talisman, or a spell. Others whisper that Tutankhamun's mirror was more dangerous than beautiful, more curse than ornament, and so it earned a name, carried not in inscriptions but in hushed retellings. The mirror that blinded the king. When Howard Carter first uncovered the tomb of Tutankhamun in 1922, the world was dazzled by the golden sarcophagus, the jeweled dagger made from a meteorite, and the treasures of unimaginable wealth. Yet nestled within the piles of daily goods, ritual objects and protective amulets, lay this mirror, its surface dulled by centuries, but still gleaming faintly as if a faint memory of sunlight remained locked within. What role did such an object play for the boy king who ruled Egypt at the age of 9, and who died mysteriously only a decade later? Was it simply a luxury of grooming, a polished disc for checking one's appearance, or was it an artifact of deeper, darker importance? The Egyptians never considered mirrors mere tools of vanity. They believed reflections were part of the soul. To see oneself was not only to see skin and bone, but also the spiritual double, the Ka, the essence that lingered beyond death. A mirror, therefore, was a bridge between worlds, a tool through which the living might glimpse their eternal twin, or the dead might catch hold of the living. Tutankhamun's mirror, carved with handles shaped like the Ankh, the symbol of life, was more than metal. It was a portal. But here lies the mystery. Accounts from Carter's team recall that when the mirror was lifted into the light of the tomb's opening, it flared so brightly that some of the workers recoiled, claiming their eyes burned. Was it the polished alloy reflecting desert sun after centuries in darkness? Or something stranger, as though the mirror had swallowed all the years and released them at once in a blinding flash? Carter himself dismissed it as imagination, a trick of dust and daylight, yet the workers muttered of curses, of objects that remembered what mortals should not. In ancient Egypt, mirrors were sometimes aligned with the sun at ritual dawns. Priests used them to summon Ra's presence, catching the light and directing it onto sacred statues to awaken them with divine fire. A king's mirror, then, was not trivial. It was a symbol of his union with the gods, his right to channel the power of the sun. Tutankhamun, the child king, would have held it in his hands during ceremonies, perhaps blinded briefly by its brilliance as it returned the light to his own eyes. Did he see only himself reflected, or did he glimpse the god whose energy the mirror captured? Legends that followed told of kings punished by their own reflection, undone by what they saw. Some said the mirror did not show Tutankhamun his face as it was, but as it would become marked by weakness, illness, and death, for he was plagued by frailty, a malformed foot, scoliosis, malaria. To hold the mirror may have been to confront not majesty, but mortality. What if, in that blinding light, the boy king saw not a ruler, but a body already unraveling? Others believed the mirror was not Egyptian at all, but foreign. Its alloy, some scholars argue, was meteorelth iron, or a mixture not easily replicated by known techniques of the time. If true, the mirror's gleam would not merely have been bright but unnatural, catching and refracting light in ways that could dazzle or disorient. Such an object might have been seen as divine, a shard of heaven itself hammered into shape, a weapon of light, hidden in plain sight among combs and jars. In ritual practice, mirrors were also linked to Hathor, goddess of beauty and joy, but also of the dangerous power of the sun. She who could nurture or scorch, soothe or destroy. A mirror aligned with Hathor's symbol was not merely for cosmetics, it was an invocation, a dangerous channel. Tutankhamun's mirror, bearing signs of both Hathor and Ra, thus balanced delicately between life and death, blessing and curse. One story whispers that when Tutankhamun gazed into it during a great festival, the flare of the sun through the mirror struck his eyes with such intensity that he fell into a seizure. His attendants believed he had glimpsed the gods too directly, blinded by their truth. Perhaps the very phrase, "the mirror that blinded the king," arose from such an incident, whether literal or metaphorical. There is also the question of its burial. Why place such an object beside him in death? Was it to help him see his soul in the afterlife, to light his way in the darkness of Duat, the Egyptian underworld, or was it buried to remove its danger from the living, locking its brilliance away so it could no longer harm? In either case, the priests who wrapped Tutankhamun in layers of linen thought the mirror important enough to rest close by, as if the boy would need it when facing Osiris. Carter himself, who handled the mirror, never reported blindness, but many of his team suffered accidents, illnesses, or deaths soon after the tomb's opening. The so-called curse of Tutankhamun may be exaggerated by newspapers, but to the workers who had flinched at the mirror's first gleam, it was proof enough. They whispered that the mirror still contained the fire of Ra, waiting for another careless mortal to release it. To imagine the boy king holding it, the smooth disk catching sunrise over Karnak, is to see both majesty and fragility. He would have stood small before the priests, mirror raised, the golden disk dazzling back the light of the sun itself. For a moment, he might have felt divine, one with the eternal, and then as quickly as the flare appeared, it would fade, leaving his eyes stinging, watering, unable to focus. Was it glory, or was it harm? Cloaked in sacred ritual. When the mirror is examined today, locked behind glass in Cairo, it no longer blinds. Its sheen has dulled, tarnished by time. Visitors glance at it, perhaps barely pausing, as they move toward the more famous mask of gold. Yet if you stand long enough, you notice a strange persistence. Even under museum lights, the mirror seems to hold a gleam that should not be there, as if it remembers the sun. Some swear they catch a shimmer, a trick that pulls the gaze like a magnet, harder to look away from the longer you stare. The truth may never be known. Was it merely a ritual tool, polished metal that caught the eye too sharply in the desert sun? Or was it something more, a mirror that blinded not just with light, but with knowledge, the sight of the self, fragile and fleeting, even for a king? In the end, Tutankhamun's mirror reminds us that reflection is never simple. What we see may dazzle us, may wound us, may reveal too much. Perhaps the boy king learned this too soon. Perhaps the mirror was only waiting for him to look. And so, deep in the tomb, wrapped in silence and stone, the mirror rested for centuries, waiting, remembering, holding its light for the moment someone dared to lift it once more and let it shine. The ring that turned time backward. The story begins in a quiet field of Denmark, where rolling hills conceal secrets older than kings, older even than written words. In 1921, farmers digging through soil outside the village of Egtved uncovered what looked like an ordinary mound. But beneath the earth, protected by oak and peat, lay a burial untouched for more than 3,000 years. It was not a king, not a warrior, not a lord of riches. Instead, it was a young girl, no older than 16, dressed in clothes both humble and extraordinary, her hair tied carefully, her body preserved by the strange chemistry of the soil. She became known simply as the Egtved girl, and her grave would become one of the most haunting Bronze Age finds in Europe. Yet amid her woolen skirt, her bronze belt disc, and her grave goods, one item caught the attention of archaeologists in a way no other did: a small bronze ring, a circle of metal, plain at first glance, yet shaped with intention. It was light enough to wear, heavy enough to endure, and around it grew a legend that this ring was not merely an ornament, but a device, a symbol, perhaps even a charm that could turn time backward. The Bronze Age was a world of cycles. The people of Egtved lived by the rising and setting of the sun, by the growth and harvest of grain, by the eternal loop of seasons. Time was not a straight road, but a wheel. To live was to move around the circle, birth to death to rebirth, winter to summer, and back again. And a ring, a perfect circle, captured that belief. The Egtved girl's bronze ring may have been more than jewelry. It may have been the embodiment of their philosophy, that time was endless, reversible, eternal. When the ring was found, archaeologists noted its curious wear. It seemed polished in odd ways, as though handled far more than worn. It was not made to glitter like gold, nor to boast like silver. Its surface held a dull glow, a quiet persistence, as if it had been touched, rubbed, carried, perhaps in ritual. Some whispered that it was a charm of fertility, ensuring the girl's rebirth. Others suggested it was linked to the sun itself, the cycle of day and night captured in bronze. But others, those who allowed themselves to listen more deeply, believed the ring might have been something stranger, perhaps a talisman meant to rewind. Not time in the way we measure it with clocks and calendars, but time as the ancients knew it, cycles of memory, cycles of spirit, cycles of the self. A ring could return you to a moment already gone. It could call back a season, a youth, a life. For a girl who died at 16, perhaps too soon, the gift of such a ring would have been powerful indeed. The Egtved burial itself speaks of journeys. Analysis of her teeth and hair revealed that the girl had traveled far before her death, hundreds of kilometers across what is now Germany and Denmark. She may have been part of a network of Bronze Age elites, linking tribes with trade, alliances, perhaps even marriages meant to tie communities together. To wear a ring while crossing such distances was to carry a reminder of home, a piece of continuity. When landscapes shifted, the ring was not just metal, it was time made tangible, a promise that even far away cycles still returned, seasons still came, home could still be remembered. The burial shows she was no ordinary child. She wore a corded skirt, unique to Bronze Age Denmark, that exposed her legs, perhaps for ritual dances. A bronze belt disc with spirals, worn at her waist, caught the light like a miniature sun. These spirals, endless, curling back upon themselves, echoed the shape of the ring. Together, the belt disc and the ring may have been parts of a single symbolic language, spirals for the eternal motion of time, circles for its unbroken return. But what of the legend that the ring could turn time backward? It is said that during excavations, one of the workers slipped the ring onto his finger as a curiosity. Later that evening, he was found staring at the horizon, muttering that the sun had set twice. Was it exhaustion, a trick of the light, or something stranger. Such tales spread quickly, growing and retelling, until the ring was no longer simply an artifact, but a vessel of unease. The Bronze Age people may have seen the ring as a bridge between past and future. When placed upon the hand, it did not only adorn but transformed. The wearer became the pivot of time's wheel. To move forward was to move backward, to relive, to re-enter cycles long completed. In this sense, the Egtved girl, buried so young, was not lost but suspended, waiting for the turn that would bring her back. Scholars note that in her grave, no weapons were found, no treasures of kingship. And yet, her funeral was rich, her oak coffin crafted with reverence, her body laid with care. Why such honor for a teenager? Perhaps because she embodied renewal. A girl, unwed, caught between childhood and adulthood, stood as the living symbol of beginnings. To bury her with a ring of bronze was to guarantee that her time would not end, but circle back. Some even suggest she was a priestess of cycles, her dances performed at rituals marking the solstices. Her skirt, short and corded, would swing in circles as she spun, mimicking the spirals of the sun. Her bronze ring, catching the light, may have been shown to the crowd at dawn, a tiny sun in her palm, proof that the cycle continued. When she died, the ring went with her, for its power was not to be broken. In the quiet of the museum where the Egtved girl rests today, the ring lies under glass, small and unassuming. Visitors pass it quickly, eager for larger relics, brighter metals. Yet those who pause often say they feel something strange, a pull, a stillness, a sense that the world around them slows. Perhaps it is imagination, or perhaps the ring still carries what it always promised, a moment out of time, a pause in the endless forward march. What would it mean, truly, if a ring could turn time backward? Would we see again the people we lost? Would we relive youth, undo mistakes, stand once more at the threshold of choice? Or would it mean something gentler, that in cycles, nothing is ever gone? That all moments return, all seasons repeat, all lives circle back in forms we cannot see. For the Egtved girl, her short life may not have been an end but a curve in the circle. Her ring whispers this truth silently: nothing is lost, only waiting to return. The Bronze Age knew it. Perhaps we, staring into glass at a museum, feel it too. And so the ring remains, humble bronze shaped into eternity, reminding us that time is not a line but a wheel, that what has passed may yet come again, and that sometimes, in the quiet of history, a small circle of metal can hold the entire shape of time itself. The book that vanished twice. It begins with a book, though not a book in the way we know them now. No spine, no pages bound by glue or thread, no neat printing from presses. This was a manuscript born of hide and pigment, of ritual and silence, folded like an accordion so it could be opened as a screen, spreading outward like the wings of some painted bird. The Codex Borgia, a sacred book of the Mesoamerican world, likely crafted by the Mixtec or their neighbors, long before Europeans crossed the ocean. It was not written in letters or words, but in images: gods, serpents, suns, moons and stars carefully painted in brilliant red, black and turquoise. To hold it was not to read, but to enter a world where each symbol was alive, each color breathed meaning, each image sang of a truth only the initiated could hear. And yet, this book has always resisted the world's grasp. It has been lost and found, only to be lost again. Not once, but twice. It is as though the Codex itself is determined to remain hidden, to remind us that some knowledge is not meant to be held for long. The first vanishing came when its world collapsed. The Spanish conquest swept through Mexico in the 16th century, burning temples, smashing idols, silencing priests. Books, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, were thrown into fire. To the friars, they were works of demons, full of false gods and lies. But to those who had made them, they were maps of the universe, guides for rituals, bridges between humans and the divine. In the flames, entire libraries of meaning turned to ash. Yet somehow, the Codex Borgia escaped. How? No one knows. Some say it was carried secretly across the ocean, hidden in the baggage of priests. Others believe it was taken earlier, as a curiosity, misunderstood but preserved. By the late Renaissance, the Codex appeared in Europe, though no one could read it. To the eyes of scholars there, it looked both enchanting and disturbing. Pages of painted figures unlike anything in their own traditions. Gods with dual faces. Jaguars speckled with stars. Serpents that twisted into infinity. The book passed quietly through collections, sometimes admired, often ignored, because it could not be understood. It did not speak in European tongues. Then it vanished again. For centuries, no one could say where it had gone. References hinted at its existence, whispers of a strange manuscript held in a library or a private room, but when scholars searched, it was gone, as though it had dissolved back into myth. It was not until the 19th century that it resurfaced in the Vatican Library, folded and resting, almost as though it had been waiting. The book that vanished twice had returned, but still it withheld its meaning. What does it contain? That is where the mystery deepens. The Codex is not narrative. It does not tell a story as we know it. Instead, it charts ritual calendars, astrological cycles, days of power, gods of every hour. Each page is alive with motion, figures dancing, bleeding, transforming. To the untrained eye, it seems chaotic, but to priests of its time, it was precise. Every mark carried weight. Every page was a key to timing sacrifices, planting crops, reading destinies, guiding ceremonies that aligned human life with cosmic order. One page shows the rain god Talalok, eyes wide, fangs bared, pouring water from a jar, while human figures below stretch out their arms. Another reveals the death god Mictulante K'awiil, his skeletal jaw open in an eternal grin, facing the life-bringer Quetzalcoatl, feathered serpent and creator. The two sit opposite, locked in a gaze that is less conflict than balance, as if the page itself hums with the tension of life and death intertwined. The codex is painted on deerskin, coated with a thin layer of gesso, then covered with pigments made from minerals, insects, plants, red from cochineal, blue from indigo, black from soot. These colors, despite centuries, still glow with intensity, as if untouched by time. They pulse with vitality, as if the gods themselves refuse to fade. But to handle the codex is to feel unease. Some who have seen it say the images seem to shift when stared at too long. Eyes blink, serpents coil further, figures breathe. Perhaps this is only imagination, the power of suggestion in the face of such strange art. Or perhaps the book still lives, its meanings not fully extinguished by conquest. The notion that the codex vanished twice also extends beyond its physical disappearance, for even when it reappeared, its meaning was gone. The priests who could read it had long since died, their traditions broken, their voices silenced. The second vanishing was not of parchment but of knowledge. The book was present, but mute, a husk of images without its living interpreters. Modern scholars have tried to decipher it, comparing it to other surviving codices, interviewing descendants of the Mixtec and Nahawa traditions. Patterns emerge: ritual calendars, divination charts, depictions of the 2060-day sacred cycle known as the tonal pohuali. Yet full certainty eludes us. Even today, the codex remains partly closed, as if its voice can only be heard in whispers. Imagine the moment when the codex was first unfolded, in a temple chamber lit by fire. Priests gathered around, chanting the days, pointing to symbols, turning the pages like a wheel of destiny. The book did not simply tell time, it revealed the structure of the cosmos. To consult it was to touch the rhythm of the universe itself. Crops were planted, battles timed, sacrifices chosen, births interpreted, all in accordance with the codex's guidance. It was not merely a book, it was a clock, a calendar, a mirror of the heavens. And then imagine the silence when that world ended. Priests dragged away, temples razed, the book hidden, or carried across the ocean, folded shut for centuries. Did the gods within fall silent too? Or do they still whisper, waiting for someone to look closely enough, to listen deeply enough, to hear? Some believe the codex carries dangers, that to open it without reverence is to invite misfortune. The figures within are not ornaments, they are deities, forces. To stare at their faces is to call their gaze upon yourself. There are stories of researchers who dreamt vividly after studying it, dreams filled with jaguars, with blood, with endless suns rising and falling. One scholar woke and swore the smell of copal incense lingered in his room. Another claimed to have heard drumming that stopped the moment the book was closed. Perhaps this is only imagination, or perhaps the codex remembers. Even now, when viewed in the Vatican, the codex feels alive. Its folds stretch nearly 11 meters when fully opened, a river of images, a painted cosmos. Each section hums with repetition, cycles that turn and return, echoing the ancient belief that time itself is circular. Nothing is gone forever, everything returns. Even a book can vanish and then reappear, as if obeying the very laws it describes. The book that vanished twice is more than parchment and pigment. It is a survivor, carrying fragments of a worldview nearly erased. It is a reminder that knowledge can be burned, broken, buried, but not entirely destroyed. Some truths bend with time, disappear, wait, and return again. Like the sun after night, like the rains after drought. And so the codex endures, not wholly silent, not wholly speaking, waiting, perhaps, for the right eyes to unfold it again, to see not just painted figures but a living cosmos, waiting, perhaps, for time itself to turn back, to the moment when its meanings were clear, when its voice was loud, when its gods still walked among those who painted them. The book that vanished twice still waits, still watches, its pages folded like wings, its secrets pressed into silence, and if you lean close, you might feel it stir. You might hear faintly the pulse of drums, the breath of serpents, the whisper of gods reminding us that nothing truly vanishes, not forever. The cup that knew only night. They say that some objects were never meant to rest in daylight. They were made for shadows, for flickering lamplight, for whispered rooms where kings conspired and the gods were invoked. Among such objects, few rival the silver cup of Persepolis, an artifact that seemed to know only night. Its polished surface, cool and gleaming, was not a vessel of mere drink, but a mirror of mysteries, a stage for rituals, and a keeper of secrets that belonged not just to men, but to empires. The cup itself, when first described, appears simple. A vessel of hammered silver, balanced perfectly in the hand, wide enough for pouring, deep enough to hold wine, or blood, or some mixture of both if the stories are to be believed. Yet simplicity was never the language of Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. To hold a cup in that world was to hold more than liquid, it was to hold the weight of divine right, to participate in the theater of power. In the heart of Persepolis, terraces rose like mountains made by human hands. Staircases carved with soldiers, nobles and emissaries bringing tribute, columns stretched into the sky, capped with carved bulls and griffins that seemed to guard the palace even against time. Within those grand halls, light was scarce, oil lamps flickered, tapestries soaked up the brightness, gold and silver caught what remained, bending it into glimmers that danced like stars. And there, on tables of polished wood, at the feet of kings, the silver cup would have gleamed most brightly, as if it had been made to drink in the firelight and nothing else. It was not a common cup. Its walls bore markings that scholars have debated for centuries. Were they inscriptions? Were they patterns of night and sky? Some say the surface was smooth, undecorated, reflecting only what surrounded it. Others insist faint images emerge under certain angles of light, constellations perhaps, or serpents. One archaeologist, examining the faint striations along its rim, argued they were not the scars of time, but intentional etchings, a code meant to be read by torchlight. Another dismissed such ideas, claiming it was only wear from lips and hands. And yet, the whispers linger, that the cup was a star map, or a ritual calendar, or even a mirror of the underworld. What we know for certain is this: Persepolis was not a city of daily life, but of ceremony. It was a place where kings met their people only on appointed days, where emissaries traveled from Greece, Egypt, India, and Babylon to lay gifts before the Persian throne. To be offered a drink there, in a silver cup, was not casual hospitality, it was theater, it was political communion. The cup itself became part of the act, binding guest and king in a moment where wine became symbol and silver became stage. But this particular cup had a darker reputation. It was said, even in whispers among the ancients, that it held a taste of night itself. Not literal night, of course, but the heaviness of it, the silence, the obscurity, the sense that time was being swallowed. Wine poured into it seemed darker, oil reflected strangely upon its surface. And more than once it was said, those who drank from it left with dreams they could not shake, visions of winged creatures, endless staircases, fires that never burned out. Was it only the strong Persian wine? Was it the suggestion of ceremony, the overwhelming halls of Persepolis? Or did the silver itself, born from mines deep in Iranian mountains, hammered by hands that chanted prayers as they worked, retain a spirit beyond simple metal? Some legends claim that the cup was part of the treasury seized by Alexander the Great when Persepolis fell to his armies. Flames licked the columns, smoke blackened the sky, and treasures were carted away in long trains of camels and mules. Among them, it is said, was this cup. If true, then it traveled far, through Babylon, through Egypt, through Asia Minor, but like many treasures, it vanished. No clear record traces it beyond those years of conquest. Did Alexander drink from it? Did he too see shadows in his dreams? We cannot know. All that remains is the echo of its presence, like a story whispered but never finished. Yet the cup resurfaced, or perhaps its twin, centuries later, unearthed in a corner of the ruins where Persepolis sleeps. Archaeologists brushed away dust, revealing silver dulled by time, dented yet intact. And though many cups have been found, this one bore an aura, as if it carried the very silence of the halls that once held it. Some swear that when it was lifted into sunlight, it did not shine, but seemed to absorb the light, dimming it, muting it, drinking it as it once drank wine. Hence its name among modern storytellers, the cup that knew only night. To imagine it is to imagine the rituals of an empire at its height. Picture the great king, Darius or Xerxes, seated upon his throne. Around him, guards with spears, nobles with gifts, musicians plucking strings that echo like wind through pillars. Before him, emissaries bow, robes heavy with embroidery, hands full of tribute. And when the time comes, wine is poured, the silver cup is filled. Its surface reflects firelight, perhaps distorting faces, making the hall seem deeper than it is. The king drinks first, lips against silver. Then he passes it, or perhaps it is reserved only for him, no lips but his allowed. In either case, the cup is no longer a vessel, It is a crown in disguise, an object that declares, only in darkness, only in ritual, only in the theater of kings does it reveal its true self. The Persians, like many ancient peoples, believed that night was not merely absence of sun, it was presence of stars, of spirits, of realms unseen. To drink from night was to commune with powers beyond human grasp. Perhaps the cup was a tool for this. Perhaps priests used it in rites, pouring libations of wine upon altars, letting silver catch the flicker of flames as offerings vanished into air. Perhaps its surface was consulted like a mirror, watching how oil reflected fire, searching for omens. In this way the cup was not only royal, but divine, bridging the mortal and the eternal. Centuries passed, empires rose, empires fell. The silver cup, if it survived, carried with it all these layers. When held today, in museum glass or archaeological record, it may seem silent, but imagine, as your eyes trace its curve, the hands that once lifted it. Imagine the lips that once touched its rim. Imagine the halls of Persepolis, dark except for fire, alive with the murmur of languages from every corner of the known world. And imagine that this one simple object, a cup, silver, round, balanced, was a witness to it all. It is said that objects sometimes remember. They hold in their silence the weight of what they have seen. If that is true, then the silver cup of Persepolis remembers night. Not the gentle night of stars over a village, but the ceremonial night, the sacred night, when empires announce themselves to gods and men. It remembers the voices of kings. It remembers the silence after conquest. It remembers the fire that ended Persepolis. And it remembers still the shadows it once contained. Thus it is called the cup that knew only night. For though centuries have passed, and its silver may tarnish, that night lingers, not in the sky, not in history books, but in the vessel itself, waiting, watching, and holding, still, a darkness that no morning can ever entirely dispel. The scroll that refused to burn. The desert does not speak quickly, it whispers in its own time, in winds that sweep across stone ridges, in sand that shifts without hurry, in the brittle silence between cicada calls. It buries secrets, but it does not forget them. Centuries pass, empires rise and fall, and still the desert waits, until one day a hand strikes earth, and something hidden stirs. Near the village of Nag Hammadi, in Upper Egypt, where the Nile bends through fertile banks before meeting the stone jaws of the cliffs, the desert held such a secret. It was not gold, nor treasure, nor jewels meant for kings. It was words, fragile, forbidden, almost erased. Words that had been hunted, condemned, and consigned to flames. Words that should not have survived, and yet somehow did. The story begins in 1945, though the roots stretch far deeper. A farmer named Muhammad Ali al-Saman was searching for sabak, the ancient compost of earth that villagers used to enrich their fields. With a pickaxe, he struck something hollow, a jar, tall and sealed, buried deep in the cliffside soil. Imagine that moment, the sound echoing in the stillness, the sudden hush of breath. A jar could mean grain from long ago, or relics of the dead. It could mean fortune, or curse. The jar was heavy, sealed with a rounded lid. Muhammad Ali hesitated. He feared there might be a jinn inside, a spirit trapped in clay. But curiosity outweighed caution. With a swing, he shattered the jar. Out spilled fragments of papyrus bound in leather, brittle but intact, layered in dust and centuries. Disappointment flickered. No gold, no coins, just books. He gathered them anyway, stuffing them into a sack, their pages rustling like dry reeds in the wind. He did not yet know that he carried with him the voices of a lost world. Some of the manuscripts would be kept, others destroyed in the hearth by his own mother. Their words turned to smoke, but enough survived to astonish the world. These were not ordinary writings. They were the Nag Hammadi texts, 13 codices, bound in leather, filled with Coptic script. Within them were gospels and treatises, hymns and poems, myths and visions, unlike anything in the New Testament canon. They spoke of a faith both near and distant, one that had been silenced by decree and buried in fear, yet preserved in clay jars against time. Consider what they contained. The Gospel of Thomas, a collection of sayings attributed to Jesus, but not the Jesus of the four familiar Gospels. Here he was a teacher of riddles, urging seekers inward. The kingdom is inside you, and it is outside you. When you come to know yourselves, then you will be known. No miracles, no crucifixion, only words that shimmered with paradox, or the Apocryphon of John, with its vast and unsettling cosmology. It told of the pleroma, the fullness of divine light, and of emanations flowing outward like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. Among them was Sophia, wisdom herself, who in seeking to know too much, gave rise to a flawed being, the demiurge. Blind, arrogant, he fashioned the material world as a prison, mistaking himself for the highest God. To Orthodox ears, this was heresy. To the Gnostics, it was revelation. The world was not as it seemed, and within each human being burned a spark of the divine, longing to return. Imagine a monk in the 4th century, bent over a desk in the dim light of a monastery cell. The empire has turned against teachings like these. Councils have spoken, bishops have ordered. The codices in his hand are forbidden, dangerous. He copies carefully, ink staining his fingers, eyes burning from smoke and strain. He knows discovery means punishment, perhaps worse, yet he writes, page after page, preserving truths the empire once forgotten. Perhaps he and his brothers faced the moment when orders came: burn them, destroy them, erase them from memory. But instead they chose a different path. They sealed the codices in jars, carried them into the desert, and buried them where wind and sand would guard them. They trusted that someday, perhaps in a future beyond their imagining, the words would be needed again. Centuries passed. The desert swallowed the jars, layer by layer. Empires fell. Arabic replaced Greek and Coptic in the villages. Crusaders marched, then vanished. The Nile rose and fell in endless rhythm. Above, goats grazed and children played, unaware of what slept below their feet. And then the pick struck earth, and silence ended. Scholars who later unwrapped the codices must have trembled. Here were texts thought lost forever. The Gospel of Philip, speaking of mysteries of union and spirit. The treatise on the resurrection, whispering that resurrection was not of flesh, but of awakening. The thunder, perfect mind, a haunting poem spoken in the voice of the divine feminine. I am the whore, and the holy one. I am the wife and the virgin. I am the barren one, and many are my children. Its words rang with paradox and fire, as though the very cosmos spoke in riddles. The discovery was not just of lost writings, but of a lost world, a vision of Christianity in its earliest centuries, before orthodoxy hardened, when many voices competed, clashed and blossomed. A world where belief was not yet one road, but a labyrinth. And yet, how fragile their survival was. The farmer's mother, unknowing, fed some of the pages to her hearth fire. Imagine it, a text that had survived a millennium and a half reduced to smoke in seconds, sentences erased by flame. And still, not all. The scrolls refused to burn entirely. Enough escaped to change what we know of history. Now, they lie preserved under glass in Cairo, pages that once lay buried in clay. The leather bindings are cracked, the papyrus browned and fragile, but the words still speak. They speak not in certainty, but in questions. What if the divine is not distant but within? What if the world itself is flawed, and salvation is awakening from it? What if the path is not through priest or emperor, but through the hidden spark each soul carries? To read them is to walk once more into the desert, where silence holds memory, where secrets wait patiently. The Nag Hammadi texts remind us that knowledge cannot be destroyed so easily, that even when fire licks at its edges, even when decrees thunder against it, even when centuries bury it, sometimes words endure. The scroll that refused to burn still speaks. In the hush of a museum hall, in the whispered recitations of scholars, in the quiet thoughts of those who wonder at night what else the desert hides. The desert does not speak quickly, but it speaks. And when it does, it changes everything. The statue that waited for rain. In the high plateaus of central Mexico, where the seasons tilt between dry dust and sudden floods, there once stood a figure so immense, so unmoving, that it seemed less like a sculpture and more like part of the land itself. The figure was Tlaloc, god of storms, bringer of rain, keeper of the waters upon which all life depended. The stone statue that bore his likeness was not merely an offering to the divine, but a gatekeeper to survival. In its presence, people gathered not to admire artistry, but to plead for the sky's favor. The statue, carved of volcanic basalt, was believed to weigh nearly 170 tons, making it one of the largest monolithic statues in all of the Americas. Taller than a house, broader than a temple doorway, it was said to capture the very essence of Tlaloc's power. The bulging eyes, the fangs, the swirling motifs of water and lightning carved across its surface. To look at it was to look into the storm itself, a presence both terrifying and necessary, destructive and life-giving. But the true story of the statue is more than its size. It is a tale of longing, fear, and the unshakable rhythm of rain, on which entire civilizations rose and fell. For in ancient Mesoamerica, where drought meant death and water meant life, the god Tlaloc was not worshipped by choice. He was worshipped by necessity. The Nahua people, and those before them, knew the earth as a place alive with spirits. To them, the world was not an empty landscape waiting for rain, but a living cosmos filled with gods who controlled it. Mountains were the storehouses of water, caves were mouths of the underworld, and rivers carried the veins of the divine. Rain did not fall randomly, it was delivered. Storms were not weather, they were expressions of the god who ruled them. Tlaloc, the storm lord, was one of the most feared. He could split the earth with lightning, drench fields until they drowned, or hold back the rains until the soil cracked into powder. His tears were believed to become rain, his roar the thunder rolling over mountains. Farmers turned their eyes to him before planting season. Children were offered to him in rites of sacrifice, and vast temples were dedicated to his name. It was no accident, then, that a colossal stone image of him was carved and placed at Cotlanchan, near the Valley of Mexico. The people who made it were not merely artisans, they were negotiators with the divine. By shaping the god's likeness into stone, they believed they created a dwelling place for his spirit, a way to anchor his power close to the community. The statue was not meant to be silent stone. It was meant to breathe with presence, to see, to listen, to wait. And what did it wait for? The rains. Imagine standing before the statue centuries ago. The air is dry, the soil is split into fine lines like broken pottery. Farmers press their palms together in quiet offerings, while priests burn copal incense, the smoke curling like clouds before the god's carved face. Drums beat in steady rhythm, imitating thunder. Shell trumpets echo the sound of wind. Children, dressed in blue feathers, stand in solemn procession, their tears seen as omens of rain to come. The ceremony is not entertainment, it is survival. If Tlaloc is pleased, the rains will arrive, seeds will sprout, and harvests will fill granaries. If he is angered, the sky will remain empty, and hunger will spread like shadow. The statue becomes the axis of this ritual. Its bulging eyes seem to stare past the mortals, gazing toward the clouds themselves. Its mouth, carved with curling fangs, looks forever poised to speak in thunder. To the people, it is not just rock. It is Tlaloc himself, waiting, deciding, holding the balance of life. When the Aztec Empire rose centuries later, Tlaloc's cult remained powerful. Even the mighty temple of Tenochtitlan, with its twin pyramids dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, the war god, and Tlaloc, the rain god, placed them side by side. War and water, both were necessary to sustain empire. And yet the great statue of Tlaloc endured apart, far from the capital. At Cotlan, it remained rooted, immovable. The villagers who lived around it came to see it as part of their own landscape. When rain was late, they prayed to it. When floods came, they remembered its power. Children grew up playing in its shadow. It became less an idol of fear and more a guardian, an ancient neighbor whose watchful face never turned. But the stone was never just stone. In its silence, it gathered centuries of whispers, hopes, and fears. Generations came and went. Empires rose and collapsed. But the statue waited. It did not move with time. It remained, as the people said, until the rain itself decided to shift its place. In the 20th century, long after empires had vanished and the ancient rites had turned to memory, the statue was approached again, not by priests, but by archaeologists. In 1964, the Mexican government decided to move the colossal figure from Cotlanchan to the National Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City. It was meant to become a centerpiece, a symbol of the nation's ancient heritage. But the relocation was anything but ordinary. The people of Cotlanchan resisted. To them, the statue was not merely history, it was part of their town's identity, a presence that had watched over them for as long as memory stretched. Taking it felt like uprooting not just stone, but spirit. When finally the government arranged the move, an event occurred that sealed the statue's legend. On the very day it was transported, a massive thunderstorm broke out over the Valley of Mexico. The skies opened with a downpour so sudden and fierce that many saw it as a sign. Tlaloc himself had awakened, announcing his displeasure, or perhaps his agreement with the journey. And so, under torrents of rain, the 17-to-end figure was brought to the museum. Today, it still stands outside the entrance, taller than visitors, heavier than trucks, older than cities. Millions walk past it, seeing in its carved face the enduring gaze of a god who once commanded the skies. But does the statue still wait for rain? That is the question whispered in silence. Some believe that even in its new resting place, the spirit of Tlaloc remains within, watching, waiting. Others see only stone, a masterpiece of ancient engineering, remarkable for its size and weight, but empty of divine breath. Yet when storms gather over Mexico City, when thunder rolls and rain lashes against the museum's steps, visitors pause at the statue. For a moment, the line between stone and sky blurs. For a moment, it seems the god still answers. The statue does not move, does not speak, but it holds within it centuries of prayers. To look upon it is to glimpse a world where rain was not chance, but will, where gods were not distant, but present in the carved stone before you. And so it stands. The statue that waited for rain, still waiting, perhaps not for water, but for us to remember the fragile balance between humanity and the forces that sustain it. The hand that held a storm. There are artifacts that feel less like objects and more like gestures frozen in time. The hand of Sabazios is one of them. It does not rest quietly, as most relics do. Instead, it stands raised, bronze fingers extended, palm outstretched, as though caught mid-command. Upon its surface, carved and cast in extraordinary detail. Tiny creatures climb and curl, serpents winding across knuckles, frogs poised upon the wrist, pine cones pressed into the folds of bronze, and eagles etched into the palm. It is a hand, yes, but also a cosmos, a storm contained, a world symbolized in gesture. To those who carried it in ceremony 2,000 years ago, it was more than metal. It was Sabazios himself, present and near. The god who rode storms, who held thunder in one hand and rebirth in the other. To understand the hand, one must begin in Thrace, the ancient region that stretched across the mountains and valleys of what is now Bulgaria, northern Greece, and parts of Turkey. Thrace was a land of herders, warriors, and wandering tribes, a place where the sky was watched with constant vigilance. For in Thrace, storms were not merely weather, they were the voice of the divine. Sabazios was born from this landscape. He was the rider god, depicted upon horseback, often trampling serpents beneath his steed or guiding a snake in his grasp. To his worshippers, he was a sky father, a stormbringer, a traveler between worlds. He could bless the earth with rain, but he could also summon destruction with lightning. He was motion itself, never still, always riding, always between. When Greek travelers first heard his name, they struggled to place him. Some saw Zeus in him, the ruler of storms, the father above. Others saw Dionysus, whose rites brought frenzy, liberation, and ecstasy. Still others linked him to Sabazios, the wanderer, a deity who crossed borders, who appeared foreign yet familiar. In truth, he was all of these, and none of them. Sabazios refused the neat categories of Greek thought. He was Thracian, and his essence was a storm. The bronze hands created in his honor were not idols in the usual sense. They were not meant to represent the god's face or form, but his presence, his blessing held outward. Priests and devotees carried these hands on poles, raising them high in rituals, or left them in sanctuaries as offerings. The gesture was itself the prayer, a command to the storm to be gentle, or to arrive, depending on the need of the people. The open palm was universal. Across cultures, an extended hand meant peace, power, protection. For Sabazios, it became his seal. To raise the hand was to call him down. To see it lifted in torchlight, bronze shimmering, was to know that the storm rider himself was near. And the details upon the hand were never random. The serpent, curling across the wrist, spoke of rebirth and divine energy, slithering between the realms of earth and sky. The frog, humble yet powerful, represented water and fertility, the promise of rain to come. The pine cone evoked eternal life, its seeds hidden yet endless. Birds, often eagles, marked the heavens. Even the smallest engraving carried meaning, each a symbol layered upon another, until the hand became a map of the universe. Storm, life, death, rebirth, all cradled in bronze. Imagine, then, a ritual deep in Thrace, perhaps within a mountain sanctuary. The air is heavy, clouds massing above, torches flicker in the wind. A priest steps forward, draped in Thracian cloak, bronze hand fixed atop a tall staff. He raises it high. The people fall silent. Thunder growls across the hills. The serpent on the bronze seems almost alive as shadows dance over it. The priest chants in a language long lost, invoking Sabazios, rider of storms, guardian of travelers, lord of thunder. The hand glints, steady and commanding, as though it alone holds the storm at bay. For those gathered, there was no doubt the gesture worked. The storm answered. The god was present. As Sabazios' cult spread, the bronze hands traveled with it. In Athens they were placed within shrines. In Rome they appeared in private homes, carried as protective talismans. Even in far-off Anatolia, people raised them as symbols of blessing. Each hand carried the same silent authority. The palm extended, the storm contained, the cosmos etched in miniature. The Romans, ever eager to adopt and adapt foreign gods, gave Sabazios a place in their vast pantheon. They likened him to Jupiter, the sky father, but also to Liber, the bringer of freedom, and to Serapis, the healer from Egypt. The hand, they believed, was not only a religious token, but also a charm against evil, a defense against the unknown forces that haunted daily life. But behind the Roman names and Greek comparisons, Sabazios remained Thracian, his true nature known best in the land where storms swept down mountainsides, and herders looked anxiously at the sky. When one looks today at these bronze hands, now silent and still, it is tempting to think of them as lifeless artifacts. Yet even under glass, they carry a strange charge. Their gestures seem to reach beyond time, as though still raised, still commanding. The animals upon them, green with patina, remain symbols of mysteries unspoken. It is easy to imagine that if one could raise such a hand once more, under storm clouds, lightning would answer, that the ancient god, rider of the skies, would hear again the prayers of his people. The hand, after all, does not rest. It remains lifted, eternal, as though it has never stopped holding the storm. The story of the hand of Sabazios does not end in Thrace. like the storm itself, it wandered, carried by wind and voice, by traders and soldiers, by priests who crossed frontiers with bronze hands packed among their few sacred possessions. By the time the cult reached Greece, Sabazios had already been transformed. The Greeks saw in him echoes of their own gods: Zeus the thunderer, Dionysus the ecstatic, Asclepius the healer. But what made him different was his gesture. Greek statues raised spears or cups, but Sabazios lifted a hand, palm open, alive with symbols. The Greeks borrowed the image, but even as they did, they admitted it carried something foreign, something wild, something that smelled of Thracian mountains and untamed storms. In Rome, the cult of Sabazios found yet another home. The city was crowded with gods, imported from every province and every people Rome had conquered. Yet the bronze hand stood out. Romans did not only treat it as an idol, they treated it as a charm, a warding object, a talisman that could be displayed in houses to repel harm. We have records of Roman senators whispering suspicions about Sabazios' rites, fearing that his followers met in secret, hidden from the civic gaze. There were rumors that the hands concealed mysteries, teachings not meant for the uninitiated, knowledge too potent to be spoken plainly. Inscriptions hint at initiations, processions, feasts where wine flowed and songs rose into the night, and in those gatherings the bronze hand would always appear, held high, serpent coiled, frog gleaming, pinecone shining in torchlight. What did those who joined believe? Some scholars think they were promised rebirth, a new life after death. Others suggest Sabazios was invoked for protection on long journeys, for his was a wandering god, a rider always in motion. To carry his hand was to be shielded on the road, whether on horseback, wagon, or ship. The serpent on the hand may have symbolized that promise: death overcome, the skin shed, life renewed. The frog may have whispered of fertility, the pinecone of immortality, the bird of flight to higher realms. Each detail layered meaning upon meaning, until the gesture became not only a hand but a map of salvation. But there is a quieter story too, hidden beneath the thunder of rituals. Archaeologists have uncovered these hands in homes, tucked away in corners, placed beside small domestic altars. In those households, the hand was not a grand temple idol, but a private comfort. It may have been touched each morning for blessing, or raised each evening in prayer for safety. One can imagine a Roman mother pressing her palm against it before her child's journey, a traveler clasping it before setting out on dangerous roads, a farmer asking it to bring rain to his fields. The hand was not distant, it was near. It lived not only in temples but in kitchens, in courtyards, in the heart of daily life. Time, however, is merciless, even to gods. As Christianity spread across the empire, Sabazios, like many deities, faded into silence. His name slipped from common speech, his worship became memory, then rumor, then myth. But the hands endured, buried in soil, hidden in sanctuaries, sealed in the earth by those who once prayed to them. They slept. When they were unearthed centuries later, their bronze still shone with stubborn resilience. The serpents and frogs, the pine cones and birds, all remained, waiting to speak again. And even in modern museums they do not seem mute. Visitors pause before them, drawn by their strangeness. The gesture, so simple yet so commanding, still holds power. For a hand raised in blessing, in command, in storm, is older than language. Perhaps that is why the hand of Sabazios feels timeless. It bridges Thrace and Rome, temple and home, storm and silence. It suggests that the divine can be felt not only in the vastness of the heavens, but also in the smallest gesture of the human body. To look at the hand is to see how people once sought the sacred, not in distant statues, but in a raised palm, alive with symbols, reaching out across the storm. And it is to wonder if such a hand were raised again, beneath gathering clouds, would the sky still answer? Would thunder roll, and lightning leap, and the god return for a moment, riding the storm he once held in his grasp? Tonight, the hand rests in glass cases, quiet and still. Yet in its silence, it still points upward, as if caught mid-command, as if still speaking to the sky. The storm is gone, the priests forgotten, the worshippers dust, but the gesture remains. The hand is raised, the storm is held, the god is near. The cup that gathered silence. The silver cup lies in quiet repose, cradled by centuries of dust and earth, as if the very soil has chosen to shield it from the touch of careless hands. Its surface gleams faintly, catching a memory of light that has long since vanished from the mountains and rivers where it was first forged. Close your eyes and imagine it, balanced in the palm of a ruler, a priest, or a traveler. Anyone who once felt the weight of history pressing gently against their life. The cup is more than metal, it is a vessel of memory, a collector of sound, and a keeper of silence. Bactria, the land where it was crafted, stretches across what is now northern Afghanistan. In antiquity, it was a crossroads of cultures, a place where the Persian, Greek, Indian, and nomadic worlds converged. The hills and valleys of Bactria echoed with the footsteps of soldiers and merchants, of priests and kings, all leaving traces upon the land. It was here, amidst the interplay of desert winds and mountain streams, that a craftsman first lifted molten silver, shaping it into a form meant to endure beyond time itself. Imagine the process, slow and deliberate. The silver, purified over fire and quenched in water, was hammered into a thin yet resilient vessel. Every curve, every rim, every gentle indentation was intended not only for practical use but for meditation, for reflection, for the intimate experience of drinking. Some believe that these cups were used in ritual ceremonies, where the act of lifting a vessel to the lips became a gesture of communion with the divine. Others suggest they were used in quiet gatherings of thought, philosophical or spiritual, where the conversation would fade as the silver captured and held silence. It is said that when the cup was filled, the very act of drinking created a soundless pause, a moment suspended between the chaos of the world and the quietude of contemplation. Perhaps the ancients sensed that silence itself was sacred. In Bactria, a land of traders and invaders, of rivers that carried both grain and rumor, the cup was a sanctuary. It gathered the murmurs of those around it, the whispered prayers, the soft clink of coins, the rustle of animal hides, and compressed them into a single, enduring calm. The decoration of the cup hints at its importance. Intricate patterns wind along its rim and body, geometric forms mingling with representations of flora and fauna. There are traces of birds in flight, their wings etched into silver, perhaps to signify freedom or divine ascension. Tiny vines spiral in delicate repetition, symbolizing life's persistent continuity, even amid turmoil. Each motif was chosen with intent, each detail telling a story of devotion, of artistry, of reverence for the natural and supernatural alike. In the hands of Bactrian kings, the cup may have witnessed oaths sworn and pacts made. It may have held wine poured for offerings to deities, water collected from sacred streams, or a fragrant concoction meant to induce meditation. The surface of silver, cold yet inviting, responded to the warmth of the hand, creating a fleeting intimacy between object and user, a connection that extended beyond time and into memory. The cup was not merely an item of utility, it was an instrument of presence, a way to anchor oneself amidst the shifting currents of life and empire. Consider, too, the journeys it endured. Bactria was a land of conquest. Alexander's armies marched through its valleys, merging Greek and Eastern traditions in a fusion that would resonate for centuries. Empires rose and fell. Traders carried silks, spices, and metals along the Silk Road. In all of this, the cup may have traveled, sometimes hidden, sometimes proudly displayed, always maintaining its silent vigil. Each mark it bears tells a story of movement, of endurance, of lives lived in the shadow of its quiet brilliance. And then there is the silence it carries. Unlike weapons or coins, the cup does not speak of conquest or commerce. Its presence is subtle, yet profound. It absorbs the laughter of celebrations, the sighs of grief, the solemnity of prayer. It holds them together, a quiet reservoir of human experience, unbroken and unyielding. It is as though the silver itself remembers, retaining traces of what was spoken softly in its presence, preserving it long after voices faded from the earth. When modern archaeologists unearthed the cup, they did not find it in isolation. It lay among other objects, remnants of a society that thrived at the edge of empires, a culture that valued both beauty and subtlety. There were coins, fragments of pottery, weapons, textiles, and jewelry, all telling a fragmented story of a people connected to worlds both near and distant. Yet the cup drew attention immediately, not for its opulence but for its aura, a quiet magnetism that invited reflection. To hold it, even through the barrier of glass, is to feel a tether to centuries past, to understand, however fleetingly, the rhythms of a life once lived in Bactria. The cup's form is deceptively simple. There are no enormous engravings proclaiming kingship, no overt symbols demanding attention. Instead, there is elegance in restraint, a conscious choice to let subtlety dominate. The rim curves gently, catching light as it turns. The body is slightly convex, providing both stability and beauty. Perhaps this very restraint is what gives it power, the ability to convey sanctity without shouting, to command presence without asserting dominance. It invites the mind to pause, to enter its sphere of quiet observation, to become aware of the space between words, the weight of reflection, the sacred nature of silence itself. Imagine again the cup in use, centuries ago. A priest lifts it slowly, filling it with water from a holy spring. The flame from nearby lamps dances across the silver, casting light and shadow that play upon the walls. A chant begins, low and rhythmic, the words unintelligible to outsiders but resonating with those who know the ritual intimately. The cup rests upon the priest's lips, transferring both liquid and meaning. A pause follows, a moment when the world outside seems suspended, when time itself is held within the vessel. Then the ritual continues, but the cup has done its work. It has gathered silence, collected the sacred, and held it safely in its curved walls. Even in its silence, the cup teaches. It reminds us that not all power lies in dominance, in conquest, or in display. Some power lies in restraint, in patience, in the capacity to hold and honor what is ephemeral. The Bactrians who first touched this cup understood this intuitively. In a land constantly shifting under the pressures of trade, war, and migration, the cup was a steadying presence, a tactile anchor, a witness to human perseverance. It offered a private sanctuary amid the public turmoil of empire, a quiet retreat in which one could breathe and reflect. The preservation of the cup is almost miraculous. Silver is soft and prone to wear, yet this vessel has endured, a testament to the skill of its creators and the care of those who safeguarded it across generations. It has survived floods and fires, the hands of conquerors and looters, the passage of time itself, retaining its form and quiet power. Its continued presence allows us to reach across centuries, to imagine the hands that molded it, the rituals it witnessed, the thoughts and prayers it absorbed. Today the cup sits in a museum, displayed behind glass, catalogued and studied. Scholars examine every detail, deciphering its craftsmanship, analyzing its alloys, tracing its motifs to broader cultural influences. Visitors pause, drawn by its unassuming beauty, unaware that they are holding, in their imagination, the silence of centuries. The cup communicates not through words or inscriptions, but through presence alone. It asks nothing, and gives everything, offering a bridge to a world long gone yet still alive in the quiet resonance of silver. To truly understand the cup, one must allow themselves to enter its rhythm. Imagine yourself lifting it, imagining the weight, the coolness of silver against the skin. Hear nothing but the slow inhalation and exhalation of your own breath. Allow the mind to settle into the stillness that the cup has accumulated. Sense the accumulation of countless unspoken words, the prayers and oaths, the hopes and fears. In this concentrated silence, you touch the essence of the vessel, not simply as an object, but as a container of human presence and thought, as a chronicle of devotion, as a silent witness to eternity. The cup teaches us that even the simplest vessel, shaped with care and intention, can carry profound meaning. It holds not only liquid but memory, not only silver but spirit. It bridges past and present, connecting the hands of Bactrian priests and kings to our own. It reminds us that silence is powerful, that quietness can endure where noise fades, and that some stories are told not in grand gestures but in the patient, steadfast act of holding, waiting, and witnessing. Even now, as modern eyes trace its contours, as scholars pen articles and visitors murmur in reverent tones, the cup continues its silent vigil. It gathers stillness, collects whispers, preserves the unseen, and offers a sanctuary to anyone who will take a moment to notice. The silver gleams faintly, not from the sun or torchlight, but from the accumulation of centuries of quiet reflection, of lives that intersected with it and vanished, leaving behind a resonance captured in metal. To encounter the cup is to encounter the deliberate, the patient, the eternal. It is a reminder that some objects exist to teach us stillness, to gather what we cannot always see or hear, to hold the weight of human presence and release it only slowly in the careful turning of thought and contemplation. It is both a tool and a teacher, a vessel and a witness, a relic that invites us to pause, to honor, and to listen. And so it remains, the cup that gathered silence, holding within its walls the quiet histories of Bactria, the touch of hands long vanished, the hush of rituals that will never be repeated, and the enduring presence of stillness itself. Even across time, it continues to gather, to contain, and to teach, whispering softly to anyone who will allow themselves to hear, not with ears, but with attention, with presence, with the awareness of what it truly means to hold silence. The bowl that bled with the moon. The silver bowl rests in quiet dignity, its smooth surface reflecting light, as if it still remembers the sun and moon of 1,000 years past. Even now, centuries later, it exudes a sense of the sacred, an aura that whispers of rituals long forgotten and powers that once shaped empires. It is more than a vessel, it is a chronicle of devotion, a silent witness to the ceremonies of kings, priests, and pilgrims who once sought to bridge the human and the divine. The bowl's form is elegant, simple yet commanding, shaped to cradle liquid in a way that elevates the mundane act of drinking into a sacred ritual. In its gentle curves, one can sense the precision of the Achaemenid silversmith, whose hands transformed raw metal into a conduit between the heavens and the earth. Achaemenid Persia, the land where this bowl was created, stretched across mountains and deserts, a mosaic of cultures and peoples bound under the rule of kings, whose ambition reached the skies. From the citadels of Persepolis to the quiet temples tucked into distant valleys, silver and gold were not merely currency, but vessels of meaning. They carried the weight of kingship, the aura of divine favor, and the memory of ceremonies where mortal and celestial spheres converged. The bowl, delicate yet resilient, was part of this sacred economy, a silent participant in the intricate dance of ritual and reverence. The process of creating such a vessel was as much spiritual as it was technical. Silver, mined from distant mountains or traded along dusty caravan routes, was purified over fire, hammered and molded with meticulous care. Every indentation, every curve, every engraved motif was imbued with intention. To the Achaemenid artisans, metal was not inert, it was alive with the potential to carry meaning, to hold ritual power, to mediate between mortal hands and celestial forces. The bowl's reflective surface was designed to catch light and shadow, mirroring not only the surroundings but the inner state of the worshipper. In its shine, the moonlight could mingle with the flame of candles, creating patterns of brilliance and shadow that elevated a simple act into an experience of transcendence. The name of the bowl itself, the bowl that bled with the moon, speaks of a connection between object and celestial rhythm. Scholars have long speculated that it was used in lunar rites, ceremonies timed with the waxing and waning of the moon. Perhaps liquid was poured into it under the silvered light of night, the reflections capturing the movement of lunar phases, or offerings were made, their colors and scents transforming under moonlight. Blood may have been symbolically invoked, as a gesture of life, sacrifice, or transformation, allowing worshippers to feel themselves entwined with the cycles of nature and the rhythms of the cosmos. The bowl was no longer just a vessel, it became a channel through which human ritual engaged with the larger universe. Its decorations offer glimpses into the worldview of those who made it. Stylized animals wind along the rim, perhaps representing constellations or mythic creatures that roam the spiritual landscape of Persia. Floral patterns echo the gardens of Persepolis, a visual invocation of life and growth. Every detail was deliberate, each curve and motif meant to communicate meaning beyond words, a silent lexicon understood by those who participated in the ceremonies. The bowl was designed to speak without language, to communicate with gestures, reflections, and the movement of liquids across its surface. Consider the hands that once held this bowl. Perhaps a priest lifted it with reverence, eyes turned skyward, whispering prayers that mingled with the rustle of robes and the soft flicker of candlelight. Perhaps a king drank from it, tasting the ritual liquid and sensing the weight of divine sanction settling upon his shoulders. In every case, the bowl served as an intermediary, connecting mortal desires, divine authority, and the natural world. The silver absorbed the intentions and focus of those who touched it, storing energy and memory in a way invisible to the untrained eye, but palpable in the aura it still radiates today. The journey of the bowl over centuries is as intriguing as its original purpose. It survived political upheavals, wars, and invasions that swept across Persia, each threatening to erase the memory of its existence, yet it endured, carefully guarded by those who recognized its value, not only as a material object, but as a vessel of sacred continuity. It may have passed from temple to palace, from one priestly family to another, each generation understanding, in its own way, that the bowl was more than metal. It was a custodian of silence, ritual, and cosmic balance. When modern archaeologists unearthed it, they found not just a piece of silver, but a relic of human devotion, a tangible link to the spiritual practices of an ancient empire. The bowl invites contemplation, demanding that one pause, breathe, and consider the centuries of human life that have flowed around it. Its surface captures not only light, but imagination, allowing us to peer into a world that is gone, yet preserved in metallic memory. Its practical uses may have been simple, yet its symbolic resonance was vast. Water, wine, or milk might have been poured into it, each liquid carrying different ritual significance. The reflections of candlelight and moonlight on its surface would have transformed the simple act of drinking into a layered, meditative experience. In these moments, participants would feel a connection to something larger than themselves, a universe ordered in cycles of light and shadow, life and death, presence and absence. The bowl served as a focus, an anchor that allowed humans to sense their place in the cosmos, to align themselves with forces unseen yet palpably present. Even today, the bowl speaks to those who study it. Researchers analyze its composition, scrutinize its engraving, and trace its origins. Each observation reveals new insights into the culture, technology, and spirituality of Achaemenid Persia, yet no scientific measurement can fully capture its essence. It is not merely an artifact, it is a participant in history, an observer of centuries, and a keeper of secrets. Its silver holds a resonance that transcends the physical, reaching into the realm of human consciousness, inviting all who look upon it to consider the passage of time, the fragility of existence, and the sacred potential of ordinary objects. The bowl's silent testimony challenges modern assumptions about ancient life. In an age where technology dominates, where speed and noise overwhelm, the bowl reminds us that the past held rituals of quiet power. It speaks of contemplation, attentiveness, and reverence, qualities that shaped the rhythm of Achaemenid life. Holding or even imagining the bowl encourages a stillness that is rare in contemporary experience, a pause in which the mind can sense the continuity of human thought and devotion across millennia. The bowl is also a mirror of artistry. The silver was not merely functional, but expressive. Every line and curve was carefully chosen to communicate subtle meanings, to draw attention to specific moments during ritual, to emphasize reflection, repetition, and order. Its design is a testimony to the sophistication of Achaemenid craftsmanship, a culture capable of blending aesthetic refinement with spiritual depth. It is a silent teacher, demonstrating that beauty and utility can coexist in perfect harmony, and that objects can transcend their materiality to embody ideals, beliefs, and aspirations. Imagine the scene again, a night sky above Persepolis, stars glimmering faintly, the moon casting its pale glow over the city. In a temple courtyard, incense smoke curls upward, drifting over stone and silver. A priest holds the bowl, liquid shimmering in its depths, patterns of reflection moving with the flickering flame. Chanting rises softly, harmonizing with the wind in the colonnades, and in this sacred pause the world seems to balance perfectly. The bowl, simple yet profound, gathers the moment, containing not just liquid but the essence of ritual, memory, and cosmic awareness. In that instant, the universe feels contained, ordered, and comprehensible. The bowl's story is not just about what it once held, but about the intentions it carried and the energies it absorbed. Through years of ceremonies, offerings, and silent reverence, it became a vessel not only of silver, but of human consciousness. Every ritual gesture, every breath, every whispered prayer added to its invisible tapestry. Even in the absence of human touch, it radiates this accumulated experience, inviting anyone who comes near to sense the continuity of devotion, the passage of time, and the interweaving of human life with cosmic cycles. Even now, after centuries of concealment and rediscovery, the bowl continues its quiet vigil. It preserves the memory of its creators, the devotion of its users, and the spiritual energy imbued through countless rituals. It reminds us that objects, when crafted with intention and respect, can endure as conduits of thought, belief, and transcendence. They can hold within them the rhythm of a civilization, the hush of sacred ceremonies, and the resonance of human aspiration. To encounter the bowl that bled with the moon is to encounter a bridge across time, a tangible connection to a civilization that understood the power of ritual, the sanctity of silence, and the eloquence of subtlety. It is to touch, through imagination, the hands of those who shaped and revered it, to feel the pulse of a culture in a single object, and to understand that history is not always loud, but often whispered, folded into silver, and preserved for those who are willing to listen. It teaches that meaning can be contained in small gestures, that devotion can reside in the most delicate forms, and that silence can speak louder than words. Its silver walls capture the essence of Achaemenid Persia, the artistry, the spirituality, and the human desire to connect with something greater than themselves. Even today, the bowl invites us to pause, to reflect, and to honor the quiet power that has persisted through the ages. A reminder that some objects are far more than what they seem. They are vessels of memory, keepers of silence, and witnesses to eternity. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history's most mysterious relics. If you enjoyed exploring these secrets, please like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from. Until next time, keep uncovering the mysteries of the past.